So there are staff on this call or on this meeting who were part of all of those discussions. The challenge you have before you is to pick up this discussion as a different committee and continue on to help guide council with recommendations on where to go from here. Provide what was transpired with each group since the funding was awarded. So we're going to go through each one. I want to identify some of the challenges or each of the specific challenges that staff have hit pretty much a roadblock. When we went to council, we were sort of going, okay, so where do we go from here? Because it's been 2 years since this money was awarded and some projects aren't moving forward. And we want to hear from this group on how you'd like to proceed with the process to provide council recommendations. In our report to you, staff recommend that the CSAC meet or hear from each of the groups directly from where they are on each project and what their intentions are going forward. We can invite the groups to the next meeting and provide them with 10 minutes as a delegation to present where they're at, where they've been, where they're going. And then this committee can also ask them questions. So you've got all the background information. You can prepare some questions to ask them rather than staff trying to be the intermediary here on where they're going and what they're doing. I think it's a really good idea that you hear directly from them. So just a quick background. Back in 2018, CSAC took a great deal of time to review these grants. It was not a small amount of money that was being awarded. There were 22 applications received for evaluation by CSAC, totaling just over $6 million. This was for the MacDonald Trust Fund, and those were for projects that were for community benefit in the town of Elora only. The committee was diligent and worked on evaluating and recommending the allocating the $1.5 million in funding that was available to 8 projects. Council approved the recommendations and staff were then directed to work with each recipient to allocate the funding. Each project was to sign an agreement. So the process was they were awarded the funding, then they had to sign an agreement with the township on how that money would actually be allocated, spent, a lot of details in those agreements, as you've seen, because this is money that we're giving to some groups to perform work on their own property. We want to make sure it's funded properly. And then once they have those agreements, then there should be a timeline for them to proceed with the project. As it was directed by council during the time when they were setting up the application process, it was directed that the application should be simple. That a lot of times these grants, if you've ever applied for some funding grants, especially the government grants, are quite complicated, require engineer reports and specific budgets. And it was intentional that the applicants provide, or that the application was very simple to fill out. And so I guess that's where we're leading to some of the challenges we have today. The applications lacked detail, quotes, they weren't shovel ready, etc. So now we're in a situation where some of them realize they didn't quite apply for enough funding. So what do we do? Or in one case, you know, the project can't be completed. So we're coming back to say, where do we want to go from here? So 2 years has passed. And of course, last year, COVID delayed some projects, which you'll hear. And that can be expected with a lot of our capital projects in the township. And some have hit real hard roadblocks, and we're not sure where to go from here. So I can share with you that all the recipients need more funding. So don't hesitate to be aware of that as we go through this process. And Dorothy and Matt are here. They attended all of the CSAC meetings that when these decisions were made. And I know Carrie O'Kane is on the call on the meeting today, and she was also part of those discussions. So if you have any questions about how things happened or went down during the discussions, since you weren't part of them, of course, they can share that information. And last, I just wanted to share that the funds were awarded for the project. So 22 projects were submitted, 8 received funding, and it was for the project. And I know that the people who were at these meetings, they struggled with some of these decisions. They were a lot of great applications. So it's the project that received the money, not necessarily an organization. I'm just checking my notes here, make sure I've covered some sort of the background. So really, council saying, help us out, give us some direction and some recommendations where to go from here. So Devlin, I'll get you to share the project list on your screen, and we'll briefly update you on these projects. Any questions sort of in the background before I move on with the rest of the presentation? Hearing nothing, I'll move on. So we're going to bounce between Matt, myself, and Dorothy, because each of us have sort of been the pivot person on, or the primary person on the different projects. So the first one on the list is the Allure Rockers and the Allure Lions Club. So just Matt, I will, if you're okay, I'll just take them back on the where we are with the agreement, and then you can update, or do you want to take that on, Matt? How we got to where we are with the agreement?
Go ahead, Pat. I can fill in where need be.
Okay. Basically,
you're doing a great job.
Oh, thanks. Tell my boss, right? Anyways, so the project was originally, the applicant is the Allure Rockers, which is a recreational hockey club, the Allure Lions Club, and that was who had submitted the application. When we started to look at the agreement and how this project could be procured, as well as actually delivered to the site, it was evident that Keating Construction was really a third applicant as part of this process. And so they returned back to council and requested that Keating Construction be added as a applicant on the application so that they could be included as a signatory on the agreement. And a bit of that has to do with our procurement procedures, and Keating Construction would be the builder of the project. So as a recipient, they would be responsible for the construction, and it would not have to go through an RFP or tendering process from the township. And this was critical because Keating Construction was contributing a significant amount of in-kind support to this project. And when that happens, it's challenging to meet the demands of our procurement policy, which have to be transparent and fair, as well as take advantage of a group who has sought extra in-kind support. So council agreed to add them as a third recipient. So the agreement is signed by all three. We also got into a bit of a challenge because the groups like the Allure Rockers are not a legal entity. So how can they sign an agreement? So there was a lot of process to get this one over the finish line, just to make sure everybody that's involved in the project is covered for liability, is indemnifying each other, and the best bang for our buck would come out of this project. So we fast forward to today and we have an agreement, and I'm going to turn it over to Matt and he can share where the project is at and where things are going. And Matt, you might want to talk a little bit about the different phases as well. All righty?
Oh, sounds good. Thanks, Pat. Yeah, no, the agreements were quite painful through this whole process. It took a long time, but it was so nice to get those agreements in place. The thought for this project was to have it started last spring. But unfortunately, because of COVID, that sort of really slowed down the plans. We basically sat down. They're looking at 2 phases, and a lot of it has to do with the funding. And with the 2 phases, the way they're broken out is basically a surface that could be hooked up to be refrigerated. So basically with that, the current facility that is there now, that would be all taken out, and basically it would be dug down, it'd be leveled, and there'd be material brought in and concrete pad with the ability to have refrigerant go through the concrete floor. That's sort of the phase 1 section. The phase 2 would be the boards and the wire mesh or the fencing that would go with that. And it was broken up like that just for the fact they didn't know where, still don't know where all the in-kind or how much the in-kind is going to contribute. So it was really hard to really put a price on phase 1 and phase 2. So the thought of getting phase 1 done, once that was all said and done, they'd have an idea of moving on with phase 2. So one of the items that the township wanted to get done with the phase 1 was bring in a contractor that knew how to put a proper floor down, and also so we wouldn't run into issues down the road. And I know Keating has been talking with a company called Custom Ice. They're a company that specializes on outdoor ice surfaces and refrigeration. So they've got lots of experience. I know Keating's sort of been back and forth with them. I know right now they're currently working with them, just nailing down a price and also a timeline for this, hopefully this spring as well. One other thing that Keating is sort of working with the township right now is just a drainage plan, and to ensure that the surface that is there now, it's not a very flat surface, and we need the proper drainage so the water's going in the right direction. So we're working with the township with that. Another item that we'll be working with them is just working with other user groups, because it is a multi-purpose pad and there's other groups that use it. One being Riverfest. Riverfest, we'll be sitting down with them just to ensure everything will work well with them. Once we get the proper schematics, it's a lot easier to sit down with these groups and work with them. So we're also waiting. We've sort of got a drawing, but not the proper schematics with the proper measurements. So once that's available, we'll be able to sit with groups like Riverfest, Farmers Market, and also we've also been chatting with the Celtics basketball just to ensure that the basketball nets are, when they go back up, that they're put in a good location that'll help benefit basketball in our community. So sort of the first phase, once hopefully we get that done up in the spring, and yeah, depending on where we're sitting with budget will depend on the start of phase 2, which hopefully if everything gets started this spring. It'd be a real nice, I think a real benefit to our community. Does anybody have any questions?
Matt, I was just going to add, if you don't mind, there is a phase 3 to this project, but that is part of a township long-term plan. So it's great to have the piping under the concrete to refrigerate that system, but we haven't actually bought all the compressors and the system that refrigerates it. So I want to say it's 2024. There's a line item in our 10-year forecast to purchase that system. So that we've agreed, if they do this work, that would be in our budget. And is it 2024, Matt? Am I testing your memory too?
No, I'm pretty sure it's 2024. Yeah. Right.
So the idea is build this, and then we will connect the refrigeration system. It's I think $350,000 in the budget to do that, and then it will be fully functional. So if you look outside today, as we're rolling into warmer weather with the refrigeration system working, you can keep the ice as long as it's cold outside. It doesn't melt. And so it stretch out a season. Last year this year we've had great outdoor rinks. Last year there was not one outdoor rink. The weather did not permit them. So this is definitely a trend. I don't know if you want to call it global warming, but there's issues with shorter frozen seasons. So this would allow for use on that pad for a lengthier piece of time. So that's the whole Bissell Park multi-purpose surface and where we're at. But I think it's a good idea. My recommendation would invite the group to speak to you, to let them know exactly what their intentions are moving forward, and probably provide them with some sense of here's your deadline to get this completed by. But there's no, I'll turn it over to, I can't see everybody, but are there any questions for Matt or I on this project? I can't hear any, and I'm not sure if everyone has their hands up, and I'm sure Devlin, if you can see everybody. We'll,
sorry, it's Jen.
Okay.
I would say, just to say that this is probably the one that we're probably the most familiar with, as like the agreement did come back to the committee. And it seems to be that this is the one that the COVID specifically has affected, and there is an agreement in place and they still have the capability to proceed. So I didn't really see any concerns with this one.
I think, yeah, we have the agreement. We're ready. We're ready to break the surface of the ground on this one as soon as we get all our ducks lined up with the construction drawings and permissions on that side of it. So that's good. I'll move on then to the Allure. And of course we can come back to any of these. The Allure Center for the Arts and Riverfest. So this was an application that came in, and then CSAC awarded something slightly different from what was applied for. And Dorothy, if it's okay with you, I'd like to just turn that over to you to explain what the application came in originally and how that was changed.
Yeah, so originally back in 2018, Allure Center for the Arts partnered with Riverfest to apply for a project, and they applied for $620,000 to build a performing arts studio, or center, I should say, not a studio. And this one probably had a big portion of the discussions around the table. It took them a long time to determine how to deal with this one. So they decided, given the history of performing arts centers, they agreed to allot them $100,000 for a feasibility study on such a center. And so over some time, I guess they thought about this and realized, nope, that's not what we want to do anymore. And they have since changed their application. And now they're applying to use the $100,000 for a pavilion on the property of the Allure Center for the Arts. I can share that the Heritage Committee has reviewed their application, and I know that they've got some concerns with it, where they want to put it. There's a lot of things that haven't been done yet. For example, a neighborhood communication on letting the neighbors know what they want to do. So we're at a standstill right now with their application because they've changed it dramatically. They now want to build a $100,000 pavilion on the property. And that's where we are right at the moment.
Thanks, Dorothy. So this would be a good group to hear from to understand whether they can change the scope of their project or not. And if they can, is this a good use of the funding? So that's up to CSAC to make a recommendation. The third project is the Allure Center for the—
Can I ask a question on that, Pat?
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, any questions?
Yeah. So yeah, I've got a couple of questions on that, because that went from an indoor, a concept, a study, $100,000 to do a study, to a complete new project. So is that the reason it's before us, is because we can't let them do that unless they reapply? Is that what we're doing here on this?
Just to clarify, so Dorothy, I believe the build of the Performing Arts Center was in the millions, and they were asking for 650 as the contribution of part of it. Is that right?
That's right. Because they had several partners at the table for this center, but they didn't want to do the feasibility study to see if it was a viable project or not. And so in the meantime, just in the last few months, they've now presented a new option for this pavilion. It's quite an elaborate pavilion. It's $100,000 pavilion.
I would just share that we've been back and forth multiple times with this group and the township to understand the project, what it was, a performing arts center. And there's been different partners coming to the table, and obviously a massive project to build something of this scale and scope. The decision by Allure Center for the Arts and Riverfest to apply for the pavilion was the realization with COVID that this is not a good time to be doing a feasibility study. It's not timely. COVID has sort of interrupted the arts and culture community, and there's a need for outdoor space for entertaining. So before we can say, sounds great, here's the $100,000 for a pavilion, they have applied now for a completely different scope of project from the original ask. So the question goes to council, can they do that? And the council said, CSAC, should we tell them they can do that? So that is the ultimate question on the table. Can they change your scope? And if they can, then is this the project they can do? Does that answer your question, Neil?
Kind of.
Okay.
Because I have grave concerns on a project of this nature. Like, we're changing the scope one, but I think when you go from a performing arts center, which in my vision is a closed building with everybody performing inside, to an outside pavilion, you change the nature of the neighborhood. And I would have to say that a feasibility study would need to be done around the neighborhood as to whether or not this is something the neighborhood wants. I mean, those residents are living there, and somebody's going to put up a $100,000 pavilion that is outdoors, which just amplifies the music and amplifies the performance. And that puts it pretty much in their living room. So I'd really like to see, at very least, a public meeting for the residents in that area to weigh in before we give any money for that.
I'm not sure if you saw Brian, but Kurt has his hand up.
So, in different comment from Neil's, actually, like, my thought is more around the fact that this was a one-time opportunity with a very unique situation of funds available. So there's no precedent on, can people change their scope, regardless of what they're asking for. So I hear what Neil's saying in terms of they need to go back and review what they're actually looking into and see whether it's a good thing. But do we need to back it up even more of, how do we entertain the thought of anybody changing what they originally asked for? Because there's no precedent for that. I don't think we have anything established within the guidelines that is okay or not okay.
You said before, Pat. Sorry, go ahead.
Nope, go ahead, Brian, please.
Well, the suggestion was that it's a project that was approved, and I guess this isn't really the project that was approved. There may be other projects that were applied for that, given weighing this one against some of the others, might be, I'm only saying, I obviously don't know, but I'm just saying this will be a tricky one.
Yeah, I agree with what you guys are saying, and that is your fundamental first question is, can they change the scope of their ask? There were 22 applications, 8 were awarded money, and there may be some upset groups that were not awarded money, and now we're changing the project. Or is this the perfect way to move forward on the project? That is going to have to be your decision, and we'll go through them, because you may see there might be another group asking the same. So let's get through the rest. What kind of a snowball effect will you have if you allow one? I know this group is keen to come here and present their concept of this pavilion to you. So they would be willing to do that, absolutely, as the next step. The next one is the Laura Center for the Arts had an independent application from the other one, and they received $380,000 to make improvements to their building. And the original ask was for accessible washrooms, window replacement, a front entrance upgrade to make it more accessible. And there was a 4th component to the application, which was also for artist residents. So they were awarded the funding, and it was very early on that they realized the funding that they had asked for would nowhere near meet the scope of the project that they had asked for. So in initial conversations, we felt it wasn't a huge change of scope for them to be allowed to drop one of the 4 components. And so they dropped the artist residencies and kept the 3. And so we said, okay, that seems reasonable to us if you can afford to do those 3 within the scope of the project. Then we fast forward to last year, 2019, the ICIP funding came out, and this group requested from council to do this accessible washroom, the windows, the front entrance upgrades, and also a greater scale project by using the $380,000 as leverage for more funding through the ICIP grant. And I think at this table we discussed when we were submitting our application to the ICIP grant that this was also one that had been submitted. So they submitted theirs, and it's for about $1 million project to improve the Elora Center for the Arts. And there's many things that have to happen before that project can come to fruition, but they did not receive the ICIP grant. So now they've come back to council again to ask to leverage the funding for a Canadian Cultural Spaces grant for a similar project. And they're waiting for the outcome of that grant. So for this one, there is an agreement in place, which was originally intended for the three pieces of the project for the $380,000. And then they have changed the scale of the project and not asked the township for more money, but used it to leverage additional funding through the province and federal governments. So this project, I guess, they're waiting to hear what the plan is. I guess I get concerned that if they don't get this grant, what's next? So this is supposed to get spent and realized within some sort of timely fashion. So from staff, we're like, what's next? Hopefully they'll get the funding and this project can go, and the three items that they're concerned about within their drawings and plans will get addressed. But wanted to bring this to your attention as to where it's at. And I think it's another good group to hear from, to see, sort of ask some questions about what's your next plan, and if you don't, where's this grant application at, and things like that, to make sure that this funding does eventually see the fruition of the three things they originally applied for. Any questions about this one? Okay. The next one too are so simple. They're done. So the skate park application, that was to build a skate park in Elora, and that project is complete. It was, they were awarded just over $203,000. The entire skate park is $430,000. So the rest of the funding came from private donations, about $62,000, and then development charges and the township's reserves. So that project is done. We have a few things to finalize in the spring, some netting and some signage. With COVID, we didn't get that done last year, but we're excited that that is open and we can check one off the box. Yay, it's done. Any questions about that project? Great, I'll move on. That one's easy. The CW Community Foundations, they requested funding for Community Endowment Fund. And they would take any amount that was available to the MacDonald funding. Obviously, they would have liked all of it, recognizing there would be other projects. So what the CSAC committee did was they awarded out the 7 other projects and looked at, there was $392 and $509,000 left. And so that is what they awarded to the Community Endowment Fund. That is now established and set up, and that project is complete. Any questions about that one? I'll move on. That one's done. Phew. Oh, Neil has his hand up.
Yeah, because I wasn't here. I wasn't a part of that. And I know the rest of the members of the committee aren't. So can anybody explain to us what that fund is? What are the restrictions on that fund, and who are they giving money to and for what?
Those are great questions. I don't have the data in front of me, but I'll do the broad strokes of it for you. Because the money was originally intended for Elora only, then projects that can be receive money for this can only be in Elora. That's part of the endowment fund. So the endowment fund, how it works is they take the capital and they invest that. And so any interest or dividends that are from that fund are then given out annually to the community. And I believe some of those grants have been awarded to groups, and they're for a variety of Elora benefiting the community projects. So that's the broad strokes of it. Of course, if you want more detail, I can provide that. There's an application process, and right. That's how the endowment works. Now, if you wanted to add another $500,000 to add to that fund, you can at any time. So if someone else wanted to donate more fund to the endowment, they can, but it can't be used for another purpose, only that purpose.
Right. The only reason I asked the question is because a lot of these people are asking for money, and they're coming back and asking for more money. the community foundation has almost $400,000. And I'm wondering if some of these people, if they needed more money, if they couldn't apply to the community foundation for some of that.
Absolutely. If they fit the funding that the community foundations is giving out, for sure.
Right. So I'll reach out to the foundation and I'll ask for what their requirements are. So,
yeah.
Okay.
Neil, as an addendum to that, I'm sure Raymond Susie would be happy to come in and give us a bit of a breakdown if that was people's interest.
Yeah, so if you want to reach out to him on your own, Neil, and bring back news and information.
Yeah, I can do that. And
Raymond.
Raymond's quite a good guy, and he would probably meet with this committee anytime we requested. So,
sure.
All right, Bungalow 55. That was a building, or it looked like a residence. It was a residence, but it was turned into sort of a number of functionalities in Elora. And one of the things they asked for was money for a garden shed, a greenhouse, growing tables, and there was a number of other things, you know, fire pit, a gathering area. The idea here was to improve the use of the outdoor space for gatherings, as well as for growing. They offered a lunch program, and the vegetables and fruits they would grow would be used to support that program. So what ended up happening since the time of their application until we were starting to, you know, nail down the agreement is that the property was sold. And so they no longer had Bungalow 55. It's my understanding it's still an organization, and Dorothy might know more, that offers a lunch program, but they no longer have this residence, this physical structure where the money was to be spent to make these improvements long-term. So when there was no building, we did rescind the funding because they started to ask for, well, we'd like to put a garden somewhere else and grow some groceries. Can we have some money for that? And we were like, well, we're awarded money to improve the building for more than just the food. It was also a gathering place and things like that. I will ask Dorothy to provide any other background on that she may remember from the discussions.
Yeah, all the funding was allocated for the property that they had on Getty Street, 55 Getty Street actually. And like I said, the building sold. I believe they still meet as a group. I know they often meet downtown at one of the local cafes, and they still provide lunches, but they don't have a physical location any longer. And the funding was for their buildings. So it just didn't make sense to continue on with the funding for that purpose.
So I would say this is one of the examples of the project that just could not be done, could not be completed. They no longer owned the property. So if you were to allow other groups to change the scope of project, this group may come in. They may not, I'm not sure, but that's just something that might happen. But we did send them a letter because they kept asking, where is this at? And we finally said, listen, you no longer have the property. We're rescinding the funding. So it was not awarded, or was unawarded at the time. Okay. KIP is a Bissell Park project, and I will turn this over to Matt to explain that project, and if anybody's not familiar with what that facility is and where they're at with their project.
Great, thanks, Pat. No, KIP is basically kitchen in a park. One of the requirements in order to run their organization, or their pizzas and their cinnamon buns, all that great stuff, they have to follow the health unit regulations. So they're required to have potable water to wash dishes, wash hands. So with that, the way it's set up right now, Township supplies a hose, and we run a hose basically from the Bissell Park tap, sort of by the pavilion, if you're familiar with Bissell Park, and it runs down to the KIP building, where basically potable water is stored. As they use the water, it goes into another holding container that will hold all the gray water. And that gray water needs to be obviously emptied. Well, probably about, well, it depends on how how much use there is too, but typically 3 to 4 times, I believe, a season. And basically, if a company comes in like Campbell's would come in and just pump that water out. So the thought here behind this project was to run a water line down and also a sewer line for the gray water. The problem with it, obviously, there just wasn't enough money asked for this project. I think the water alone to get to just to get to the KIP building would probably be about $35,000. The bigger expense is bringing the sewer line back up. Part of that, we need to dig a pit. The ground isn't the greatest for digging either. And we'd also need a grinder pump to pump the gray water up to the sewer line. So that's sort of the issue with this project. I know I've talked to Stacy, and she, you know, I know she's been trying to get some more funding to meet that, but it's been difficult. And I know she's talked about different ideas of something maybe a little different to add to the KIP area down there. So, you know, I think that would be great to have her come and chat with us, you know, next time we set our meeting up. Does anybody have any questions?
I do, Matt. So this particular group, they did get 100% of their ask. They just underestimated the overall cost of this project.
Yes.
Okay. And sorry, I just had one more question. So, yeah. So we weren't part of the money being allocated. All the particular groups were provided the money that they, that they had asked for, or was that determined by CSAC on how much each group got?
Yeah, and I think CSAC determined that, and that's a great question because I can't quite remember how that was all broken down. I don't have that much that information right in front of me. Dorothy, do you recall? Because I know it got broken down a little bit between the asks.
Yeah, not everybody got what they asked for. For example, the next one, the Allura Sculpture Project, they asked for $150,000. So they did not get all of their funding. The majority of them did, but certainly not all of them, no.
I think the other one was the Allura Center for the Arts, the one we had at the start with Riverfest. They asked for 600,000, so they got 100, right? So that's where we've put here what they actually got versus the request. I thought I had put that on, but I didn't. In the case of KIP, I think their original ask was actually for water and electrical. And in between the time they applied and money was awarded, they, I guess, had done the electrical upgrades. And they didn't realize they couldn't just ask for water. They have to ask for water and wastewater. So when they applied, of course, and if you have Stacy come, she can explain. But for health reasons and for our own standards in water and wastewater, you need both. You can't just run water down there and not have somewhere it's going to go unless you're going to put it in a tank and have it drained and taken away as is currently set up. But, you know, I'm not sure the system they have, having a tap down there provides any better service than what they're getting now with the tank reservoir that we're providing. So it'd be interesting to hear back what their plans are going forward. Did that answer your question, Dean?
I do have all the applications in front of me. That's what I keep bending down to look for. Allura Center for the Arts did ask for the 380 and they got the 380. And KIP was the 35,000 for sure.
Brian, I'm not sure if you can see Neil's hand is up. Go ahead, Neil.
Thanks, Pat. Matt, are there any environmental concerns with Bissell Park? Like, I've heard rumors that there's a brownfield issue there, and if we did try and find more money to get a wastewater pump in there, are we going to create more headaches than we're prepared for?
I don't think so, Neil. I think we're okay. I know I touched base with infrastructure on this project, and actually they're the ones that helped me out, just trying to get the real pricing and real costing on this. The only actually, and I know infrastructure also touched base with the GRCA, who because it's so close to the river,
right,
we'd have to get the green light from them, but just in chatting with them, it sounds like that's not going to be an issue.
Okay.
Any other things, or we'll move on to the final project? Oh, Jennifer has her hand up.
Yeah, so again, I think it would help me as well. So would we consider what's being needed now or asked for by KIP like a change in scope, as we would the two other ones that are definitely a change in scope? Or do we, I think that's important. Like, is it a change in scope, or is it?
Yeah, it'd be a change in scope. I am just chatting with Stacy. She's sort of looking like a bit of a shelter down there. So it'd be a gazebo. I know we've chatted and sent some information her way on different gazebos, not your typical wooden gazebo. It would be more of a structure, shade structure that would benefit the KIP KIP days when they're down there cooking and having their events. That's all she mentioned. That would be another ask if so basically I think if she isn't able to get the money, she would or the extra money for the water sewer, that she would like to use the 35 for a shelter.
Okay, and just kind of a follow-up question, like in terms of like the initial application, the funds were directed to a project, right? Not an organization?
I think I would ask Dorothy or Matt to back us up, but yes, it was the project that was, if you look at the applications, the project was what was being submitted. And then you asked, well, who's submitting it? But it was the project. I think that's fair to say. I know Dorothy and Matt were at the meetings.
Yeah, it was really based on the project and what they thought was a valuable project in the community. So.
Okay. Anything else? Otherwise, I'll move on to the last one. Actually, that's a lie. Dorothy will move on and discuss the last one on the sculpture project. Go ahead, Dorothy.
Well, the good thing is you guys are pretty much aware of the sculpture project. This particular group asked for $150,000 and they wanted to put various sculptures throughout Elora. So the committee agreed that no, we wanted to recognize Mr. MacDonald with a sculpture, and they would give funding for one sculpture. As you know, we have been back and forth. I believe the committee made a couple of recommendations on locations for this particular sculpture. I have met with this group endlessly, trying to come up with a location, and we cannot agree on a location. So where it's sitting right now, just prior to COVID hitting, we did have another possible location, which is on the south side of the river, close to the bridge. And that's what we're hoping that we're going to be able to allot for this sculpture. But we're still in COVID and nothing is moving forward on that project right at the moment because of so many other things happening on that side of the river. So right at the moment, we think we have a location. As soon as we get approval on that location, I will meet with the committee again and hope they agree with it. I don't believe they won't. I think this will be a slam dunk. They're anxious to get the project going as well. In fact, I just got an email this week, and they're very anxious to keep this on the table, as are we. So this project will move forward. We just got to nail down the location, and we're getting close to that. So once we have approval, I'll be able to announce the location where it is. Is that fair to say, Pat?
Yes, and it's going on property that isn't owned by the township. So we're at the mercy of that group to finish their planning. They are aware of this request, and we're just waiting to see what happens.
And we're pretty sure we're going to get approval on it, but you never know. Nothing's guaranteed until we have it in writing, right? So I will share that. But this group doesn't, the sculpture committee does not need to come in and meet. We all agree this project's going to go forward. We just got to get this location resolved. So I'm not recommending that this group come in and meet with us. This is going to be hopefully a slam dunk. Any questions?
I have a question. Just to clarify, the $25,000 is for the person, the artist awarded. I assume it's going to be a competition.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely, Brian.
Do they not need any administration fees or advertising fees, or is it just straight out?
I have a breakdown of what they're requiring, because we do have an agreement with them. Okay. I find it, so bear with me. I had it and then I let it go.
And to answer your question, it's not a full $25,000 for just the sculpture. They've broken down all sorts of other costs to administer it, to install it, and all of those kinds of things as well.
Right. Okay, so there's going to be a competition. We might get a bust of Mr. MacDonald, or we might get something totally different.
Yeah, they didn't seem to be a fan of doing a bust of Mr. MacDonald, but they do want something, and we have final approval on what they propose, but we do want to have something that represents his generosity and his commitment to the community. So yeah, we're not sure what we'll get yet, but so I'm trying to find that, and it's very dark where I am, so I'm struggling to, but they gave us a breakdown and it's all within that $25,000. So
Dorothy, unless someone else wants that breakdown, you don't need to do it for my,
okay.
I kind of have an idea now. I just wondered what the basics were. That's great. Thank you.
Yep.
But I mean, somebody else may want the breakdown. It's not important to me though.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Pat, did you want to carry on?
Well, I guess I just want to turn it back over to your committee and CSAC for direction on next steps. That's a summary of where the projects are at. And we've kind of highlighted the different challenges we've had. All the projects are worthy. They're all good. It's just, like we said, there's been some challenges with the amount of funding or unable to complete, looking to change the scope, and a few things that we need this committee to make recommendations on. So I'll turn it back over to you, Brian, for a fulsome discussion and direction. As I mentioned in my recommendation, the next step would be potentially to have some groups come in and present to this group, and then have an opportunity for more discussion. We do not have to make the decision tonight and the recommendations tonight.
Right. Well, I would suggest that if anyone has any pressing thoughts right now, go ahead, raise your hand, and let's go for it. Let's hear your reactions.
Jennifer has her hand up. I'll just let you know when someone has their hand up, Brian.
Yes, please do. I'm playing roulette here. Jennifer, please.
Yeah, so when I've taken a look at these, again, like you said, they're all deserving. They're all great projects, all great Center Wellington organizations. But even coming out of just like the last round of grants that we awarded, they were all based on certain criteria. And when I look at this, certain ones like the Allura Rockers, there's an agreement in place. The delay was strictly COVID. In my mind, we give them a day where we expect that to be finished and they carry on. Same with like the sculpture project. The one on the Laura Center of the Arts with the washrooms, depending. Again, I feel like maybe if a deadline or something was confirmed with them, that makes sense. The other two are complete, that's easy. And then the 3 remaining, to me, even before even asking them to come in, to me, I think the question that needs to be answered is, if they're changing the scope of the project, is that something that we see as appropriate or not? Or, you know, I'm sure there's lots of organizations. It was a highly competitive process as it was. After COVID especially, I'm sure there's a lot of other organizations that have a lot of ideas that would probably still meet the criteria of the intended grant. So even if these organizations were to resubmit, but I think under a new process, like that's to me, what's kind of fundamental. Are we going to allow the out of scope conversations to happen? Or are we going to say that, you know, like it was a project that was awarded, and if we're going to let them change it, do then other organizations in the community get the same opportunity?
That's a good point. Anyone have any answers or thoughts on that? I tend to agree with you that may be the process, but Dorothy might be having cold chills at the thought of opening this up again. But anyway, let's carry on. Kurt.
I was going to say exactly what you just said, Brian. And I made the comment at the start of, can they even do this? And the difference from our last round of grants that we worked with is I'll say again, this was a one-time deal, and the criteria established were on purpose left fairly wide open. But there's nothing there in terms of what do we do if, and then the chills, absolutely the chills, because there's no rule out there of then we will reopen to others interested if people want to change their scope, which is a scary thing to do. So I don't have an answer. I'm just concurring and saying it's probably the right thing. Is maybe also the most unwieldy thing to try and figure out.
Okay.
Kim has her hand up. I don't know if you can see that.
Go ahead, Kim.
Thanks. I was also, because if we're going to be discussing the change of the scope, it also looks like Laura Center for the Arts independently has already kind of changed the scope and the use of the money that they already have, because they're using it to leverage against the other 2 grants, the one that they didn't get, and then they were using the money to leverage for another grant, but that's not what that money was intended for. That was actually for physical upgrades to their building. So if we're going to be talking about changing your scope, it's also that it looks like they've independently decided to change their scope within receiving the money. So that needs to be looked at. And then if you do open it up for changing the scope, then that opens it up for Bungalow 55, even though they don't have their property, would probably want to get their money as well to pursue other projects. So that's just something.
Pat?
Yes, I just wanted to respond to they did not independently change their scope on both opportunities to apply for that grant. We required them to go to council for that permission. So it was council directed that they could apply for those, given all of the information on the table to make that decision. Neil was part of those discussions. I'm sure he could comment. So I believe that keeps them in compliance for their funding without having to discuss whether that scope of work was changed. But of course, you can make a different recommendation at this point. But maybe there's a recommendation beyond this, there should be no more, and they have to get it done. That could be a recommendation if they don't get the other grants.
Have they started utilizing the money that was given to them already to like start any of the process with the washrooms or the windows or anything at all? Or
they were given an upfront funding of $35,000 to hire consultants and architects and engineers to get the project started. So I believe they have spent some of that, and this is why it would be good to hear from them. I'm not sure how much, but they used some of that funding for the architectural drawings and things that needed to be submitted for the grant applications. I don't know if the architect has also provided any information on if they were just to change what they're working on, So this is a group you should probably hear back from, just to understand exactly where they're at. If they don't get the Canada Cultural Spaces grant, what's their plan? So I think that would be really worthwhile to hear from them. Neil's hands up, Brian.
Thank you. Neil.
Yeah, so we're having some great discussions over what happens when you change the criteria of a grant structure that you've organized. And Kim, you're absolutely right. We changed it at council for them. We gave them the right to take what the project was and to use it as money, seed money, to leverage it for a bigger grant. It was our understanding that that bigger grant would be used to fulfill their entire project that they had originally come from. And so I'm wondering, because Kurt and Jennifer raised some interesting questions there, that if that didn't actually set a precedent, that we have to give the other organizations that are here the opportunity to come at least before this committee and speak to why they changed or why they haven't been able to fulfill their project and what they intend to do. That maybe we need to give them the option to do that, because council has clearly given the Elora Center for the Arts the opportunity to do that. So in all fairness, maybe that's the decision here, and that we hear from them. And then after that, we make decisions on where to go from there, and give council direction on, hey, this is what we think, and go from there. So I'm really, really interested in hearing from all of you on that.
So possibly what we're saying is that maybe we'll, after some discussion tonight, if we don't feel that we have enough information to make decisions, that we push this forward to the follow-up to having these people come in and talk to us, and we can ask some hard questions. So is everyone, are we all thinking alike on that? Or is there any alternative to that?
Jennifer's hands up.
Go ahead, Jennifer.
Changing focus from those that haven't changed their scope, specifically the Elora Sculpture and the Elora Rockers. So you had specifically mentioned no need really to have Elora Sculpture come back to speak because agreements in place, and it really was a COVID delay. I'm just curious why we're not making the same recommendation for the Elora Rockers, who I feel are in the same kind of spot. Like they do have an agreement in place, and the construction was delayed with COVID. So I'm wondering why the recommendation would be to have them come back in.
I'll respond to that. So it's your choice if you would like them to come in. I think I was addressing the timing for each project with reasonable expectations for completion dates. So if you need to hear from them to understand exactly if they can complete it in one season, what that looks like, would they do phase 2 next year? That was where I was getting at, so that you could, with each project, provide timely end dates. I believe you're correct. They are on track to complete phase 1. So that's where I'm at. Perfect. That's where I was getting at.
Yeah, thanks, Pat.
Okay. Anyone else have any comments about that? So I'm thinking that we're not going to come to a particular decision tonight, other than inviting people to come in.
Sorry, Brian, one more question.
Sorry, Dean's hands up.
Oh, sorry.
No problem. I just wanted to ask one more thing. From the original timing of the funding and the grant, was there ever any timeline put into place for any of these projects, or it was under the understanding of, well, here's your funding, go ahead and proceed?
Dorothy, you want to take that one? I don't think there was. I think it was assumed that they would pick up and get it done, but
yeah. We had no idea that some of these projects will still be sitting at the table undone 2-3 years later. It was a very, very long process for the committee. Having sitting at that table with them, they were forced with some very difficult decisions. And I felt like that whole process broke that committee. It was really, really difficult for the group. And so, yeah, we had no idea that we'd expect 3 years later, we're still talking about 6 of the applications not completed yet. So unfortunately, there was no timeline set on those parameters.
Okay, well, I'll go back
Brian,
to sorry, yes.
Yeah, Neil's hand is up. I don't know if you just want to go around and let everyone
absolutely
respond to your request, right?
Let everybody have their say.
Okay, Neil, I've got you.
Okay, I'm kind of, it's like throwing darts in the dark here because we weren't part of the original application process. You know, if I take it back to last week where we all looked at the community grants and Dorothy gave us some really great criteria as to what we had to do. And we made our decisions based on who fit the criteria. But now I don't think there's a single member of this committee that was there. And we're trying to say, did they do what they said they were going to do? Dean brings up a good question of, you know, were they given a deadline? If they weren't given a deadline, what kind of a pickle are we in now? So my thoughts are that we hear from these people next month to see where they're at. But I'm wondering if the original MacDonald grant criteria could be distributed amongst this group so that we can all understand what it was the previous committee went by. And, you know, did these guys break any of those criteria, or do we have any legal grounds to take the money back or put a deadline on them to move forward, or even allow them to change their scope of their project? Is that even permitted? And I know, and I said that before, Kim, that council may have kind of euchred us because we gave permission to the Elora Center for the Arts to change that scope and use it as seed money for a bigger grant. So I think we need to kind of look at all of that. And that actually makes my stomach sink, guys, because that's a really big job.
Okay, thanks, Neil. Jennifer, do you want to add a comment? I'm just going to pick you people as I can see you.
Yeah, I kind of think the same thing in terms of being able to see kind of how they were scored is really important. I imagine all the projects were scored. Like you said, it was highly competitive. And again, I just kind of, it doesn't sit right that, like, you know, that they're able to kind of go and change the scope when there could have been really closely scored other applicants there that are not kind of getting that same opportunity. So I think that information on the scoring and would be really helpful to see. I'm also curious on what this kind of diverting a little bit, what happened with the discussion with the money that was kind of remaining from the grant process that just went to council there.
I was going to suggest that we could talk about that at the council update from Neil. Okay. I think there was a discussion there. And I would like to stay focused on this if we can.
Is that it, Jennifer? Kurt, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I'm not sure how to say it. Everyone can come and talk to us again, but it still doesn't, it's not going to really help us with do we allow this or not. So I guess we can have people to have a clear idea of actually what today's preference would be for spending the money for these organizations. That's fine. I think we'll be back at where we are today in terms of what's our recommendation. Do we allow it or not? And then that'll go to council. And and Neil, no offense to council, I do have a bit of a concern that I don't know whether our recommendation would be heard or not, or whether council would fall back upon previous decisions where they did allow some changes and just want to be fair to everybody else. So those are just my thoughts. And having said that, I think it's still fine to go ahead and we can't decide anything tonight and just hear from the groups as far as specifically what they would like.
Good. Thanks, Kurt. Dean, did you want to say something?
No, I'm just kind of listening in, and some good points are being brought up, and yeah, we definitely need to have a lot more information based on the past history of this for us to make these decisions. It's kind of tough being provided just the information that we're at right now on the scope of on how these are changing, which is understandable. They're all very reasonable on why they cannot proceed with the original ask. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So anyways, I'm awaiting more feedback before I have any more comments.
Great. Kim?
Yeah, I kind of agree with Jennifer that I would like to see what the other applicants were before we start looking at if they can change their scope, because somebody else may qualify better than what the new scope or the new change of scope is going to be. With the two that are pursuing, but they're delayed with COVID and want more information, instead of having them come in, is it possible just to have them like send in emails that are kind of giving us a new timeline and a time frame of what they're doing, where they're at? And then that could just be presented instead of them having to come and actually do a whole presentation to us, and then just include that with their information with the next agenda. But yeah, I would just like to see what the other applicants maybe had in comparison to what the new ideas are coming in. And if they're going to be coming with a new idea, maybe they should have a whole budget and then like reapply basically for what their change of scope would be. So then we can see what their budget is and what their ideas are, instead of like, oh, I think I want to build a pavilion and I'm going to use that money for that, but actually have like a whole budget out again, because we can see not budgeting kind of screwed over KIP. So, but that's my thought.
Okay, thank you. Well, we're going to, I think we're going to have a consensus.
You haven't heard from Grace, sorry.
Grace, how did I pass you by?
You don't see everybody, so I'm just
Well, I'm moving along the line here. I can see everybody if I move the screen 4 times.
Okay.
Please, Grace.
She looks like she's trying to get off mute. Devlin, can you unmute her? Do you have that power? No? Okay, just thought I'd ask as the host.
You can hit Alt-A on your keyboard. Try Alt-A on your keyboard.
There we go. Now to collect my thoughts. I agree that maybe the two that are just delayed because of COVID don't need to come in, but just send timelines in. We may not need to hear from them, but just get an idea of what their timelines are, the rockers and the sculpture. I also have trouble with the idea of a whole scope being changed. If it's just a little bit of shifting needing to happen because of COVID or whatever, that may be acceptable, but a whole change of scope really isn't acceptable. I don't think, you know, much as some of the projects might be good, there might be equally good ones. Yeah, I guess I think it breaks your heart, because I know some of these organizations are doing their best, but really we can't just say all of a sudden they can change.
Great. Thanks, Grace. To move forward, I will ask this of Pat or Dorothy. Do we need a motion to ask the people to come in, or is that do we just go ahead and do it? I think there's a consensus, although we could vote on it. Maybe a motion is the way to do it.
I think that's a Devlin question. It's a procedural question.
I think you're okay to just move forward without a motion. You're not really deciding anything at this point in time.
We're just seeking information.
Yeah.
There's some hands waving. There's some hands waving, Brian.
Okay, Kurt.
I want to be really careful with what we're doing, because it sounds like from many people in the group, there's close to agreement on you can't just change your scope. So then we're asking people to come and give us more detail on the change of their scope. That shouldn't sway us to the simple thing we're trying to decide is, should they be able to change their scope? So I think coming to talk to us will give us more information, but there's this whole other part that Kim mentioned was what else was out there. And then that opens a whole can of worms of regrading everybody, remarking everybody. So I guess I want us to be really careful on what we're asking people to come back with, because if that shouldn't change how we feel around the original rules. So then what is it we're asking them to do? And then are we also going to be inviting others? And I don't know if we can decide that tonight. I just also don't want these people to go to a bunch of work when they shouldn't really be able to sway how we feel. So we're still going to say no. And I'm not saying everybody's saying no. I just want us to be careful with what we're asking people to come back with.
Okay, well then that raises the question, if we don't have them come in, then how do we proceed? What other alternative is there? I mean, some of the, I'm sure they'd like to have their day there to tell us what they're doing. The only, anyway, why don't we, I mean, I think we've gone around the table. I think generally we want them to come in.
Brian, there's a lot of hands up before you wrap this up. I do want to respond. Can I please respond to Kurt's comment? And I think my fear is that you're hearing from 3 staff who've been working for 2+ years with these groups. They would want to hear, to share with you directly their story and their next steps and where they're at personally before you make a decision. Kip has never provided in writing to us that this is her plan to change scope. She has just verbally told us that. So I want her to share that with you personally, if that's her request, so that it's not just us having conversations and trying to work to fruition with these projects and you're hearing it secondhand from staff. You need to ask the questions you have of these projects. And I think your project isn't just, are you changing scope? It's what's your timeline? When will you complete this? Will you complete this? How are you getting more funding to complete this? There's a number of questions they need to come back. And then if they have great answers and you like what you're hearing, then you can make recommendations to council. Or if you feel one project needs to know, we need to rescind that funding and apply it somewhere else, then that's your decision. But my fear is not hearing directly from these groups puts them at a disadvantage. They don't have their chance to speak to you before you make a decision about their project. That's my only concern. But of course, it's your decision. Jennifer has her hand up. Neil has his hand up.
I think you made some good points there. I think I still come back to this. Are you changing the scope? And yes, no. And if, and are we going to allow the scope to be changed? So I wonder if, and again, like this has been delayed a long time, right? So trying to think of like the best way to proceed and not hold it up any longer, obviously, but by also following the proper process is important to keep that kind of fairness and opportunity in mind. So I wonder if like, even just like if there was a form or something that was like sent to the remaining applicants that says like, when is your intention to have complete, confirming if their scope is changing or not, and just repeating all of those things that you said, Pat, and having that in a response back to us for our next meeting in April, instead of having them come. I think that may be able to kind of help guide our, like you said, maybe our decisions on, because I think Kurt's right. I think the focus is still going to be on how much is that scope changing, what's changing in their project and where are they at now and what are their plans to continue. I don't know if having them back, I don't know. I'm wondering if like getting that feedback from them before the next meeting, being able to have those discussions might be helpful.
Neil? Thanks, Jennifer.
Yeah, and I agree with you, and I know it's difficult, but the reality of the situation is, and I go back to what Dean said, do they have the right within the criteria of what the original application said to make changes? And if they have the right to make changes, what's the scope of the changes they can make? So we need to have that criteria here. And Jennifer and Kurt, I hear you that it's to bring them here gives them false hope that they can change it or whatever. But if we have asked staff to go back and say, okay, what's your plans and let us know what you're changing and stuff. If I hear it once, I hear it 1,000 times a month when somebody says that they've sent something to me through staff and I call them back and say, hey, this is, you know, let me talk about this. That's not what I said. They have this habit of changing it. Not saying they do it deliberately, but there's that miscommunication. And so I always try to give them the opportunity to come to the decision makers. So on this, we're going to be the decision makers. So if they're making changes to their projects, I think this committee should hear it, but I think this committee should also be armed with what the previous committee was armed with, which is the criteria for the MacDonald grants. And I think if we can get that, invite them in, hear what they have to say, not telling them that we're going to accept what they have to say, but listen to what they have to say. And then we can have a discussion as a committee. Okay, what other projects are out there? Do we open this up, or are these minor enough changes that we can all live with it? And that to me is the basis of the discussion we need to have.
Thanks, Neil. Good points as always. Any others?
Yeah, I'd like to make a couple comments. So Neil, just so you know, well, the entire committee, the criteria that was developed for this funding is very brief. It is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 points. So it's not very detailed. I'm happy to share this with you. I'll send it as soon as we're done our meeting. I've been scrambling here, looking for the scoring sheets, and I do, thank God I keep everything, have all the scoring sheets of all the applications that were submitted. They narrowed it down to 11 applications out of the 22. And the top 6 were awarded. The remaining 4 was a toss-up. We had two groups actually, that scored slightly higher than 2 of the ones that got the awarding or the funding they awarded. But what happened was, because their ask was so small versus, for example, KIP asked $35,000 and their score was less than another group, but that group was asking for $300,000. So the scoring on the top 6 are in perfect order, but the last 6 don't reflect the scores. It's based on what they were asking. I'm happy to share all of these files as well. They're public documents. I have all the individual scoring sheets, but they did narrow it down out of the 22 to 11 qualified applications. So I'm happy to share that with you as well. That's all.
Great, thank you for that. Anyone else? Kim?
Dorothy, do you know if there's anything in the agreements that says that they are allowed to alter or make adjustments to their project, or is it just straightforward that that's what it is?
I can read you the 6 points. It's pretty quick. The proposed project will be open and accessible to all citizens. Projects must be based in the former village of Elora, with a significant positive impact on the quality of life for residents of the Township Center, Wellington. Number 2, the proposed facilities, program, and/or services should serve and enhance clearly identified community needs not already adequately addressed by another organization, be it government, group, corporate, or private. The applicant should have demonstrated, documented support from other sources. Financially viable and sustainable financial responsibility should be demonstrated through the preparation and submission of an operating capital budget. Any size project will be considered, and council may grant consideration to entities that do not meet all the above criteria, but are unique in nature. That's the criteria. Pretty short.
All right. Just because one of my concerns is that you're looking at like $500,000 worth of money. Like it's not, they're not just like little ones. Like the one is smaller, but it's $500,000 to have them pivot and decide that
chunk of change.
It is. Yep. And that could fund an awful lot of other projects if they're not going to use it for what they originally said that they were going to use it for. So yeah, that's just my concern.
Okay, well, anybody else? As I scan my the bottom of my screen here. I'm thinking the fundamental question is and there may be some disagreement, but are we inviting those proponents, those successful candidates to come in and speak to us on April 7th? Now, I don't know if we put this to a vote. We've heard a variety of opinions, but we obviously have to make a decision. So, Pat?
I was just going to suggest there was 3 options really, and maybe go around the table and hear what people prefer. Jennifer offered an opportunity for written submission. The one that staff, we were sort of saying, well, hey, you want to hear from these groups because hearing from us is not the same as hearing from the group, but you could visit, how they could come in person and they could be given a time limit and they do their presentation and you ask questions. You could create a number of questions in a written format that they must respond to, option 2, or option 3 is you don't have them come. So in any format to provide any feedback to this group. All this other stuff we'll get to you for sure, the background data, but I think, Brian, if you want to, I don't know how you want to nail down which is your preferred option there, but those are the 3 I've heard as we went around the group, so.
Okay, well, I guess we just go around and people can, it's 1, 2, or 3, I guess. And does that sound right? I mean, I haven't done
Great.
this before, so I'm.
Grace, yeah, Grace has her hand raised.
Okay,
could you just clarify the 1, 2, and 3? Because I thought Jennifer was suggesting for those 2 groups, it be a written, like the Rockers and the Sculpture Project. But in some ways it would be nice to have the people, was having the people in one of those options, the 1, 2, and 3? Was that one of the options, was to have them in?
Yeah, so I think with Jennifer, there was 2 different things Jennifer stated. So let's have her answer that.
So my thought was for those with an agreement in place and delays due completely to COVID, so the Alora Rockers and the Alora Sculpture Project, I don't think at this time, we're just looking for them to kind of email us confirmation that that project is still on its way and COVID is, pending COVID, that will resume as soon as that issue isn't a barrier to them. And then the remaining ones, specifically, I was saying, that's, I guess, the point of whether having them come back in person or kind of submit a written submission. I do think, like, they did get awarded that money. I do think having them, like, giving them the opportunity to clarify where they are now and speaking from them is important. And whether that's, and I still kind of am on that kind of, are we going to allow a change in scope or are we not, is kind of going to be a really important question going forward. But I think it's up to them to confirm to us that the scope indeed has or has not changed and how they see the project. So whether that is, in person or on a form.
Kurt?
Go
ahead, Kurt.
Okay, so hearing from Neil in terms of the opportunity for those involved to speak right to the committee, so so nothing is through staff. Would it make sense for 1 and 2? So basically, ahead of time, please provide this information for CSAC committee prior to coming to see us. That way, they can focus their thoughts, and they've been all asked the same information. They all have been asked for the same information, yet there's an opportunity for them to speak with us as a committee directly. So for them, they've had that opportunity to do it, but for us, we can prepare a bit ahead of time. So we're not starting from scratch, listening to each of them present. We've got that information. We can clarify, we can ask further questions, and for transparency purposes or whatever, they've had the opportunity to speak to us. So that could be a suggestion of combining both.
Okay. So I'm not sure exactly how we want to word this, but are there any other comments before we make a decision? Okay, so although let's just go around, raise your hand if you're in favor of Kurt's suggestion, which is a combination of a submission and an in-person visit at our next meeting. So that's a yes from Kim and from Dean, from Grace, from Kurt, Neil, Jennifer, and I agree also. So I guess that's a unanimous decision. It's not a motion, but a decision to go forward in that way. Everyone happy with that, or reasonably happy with it? Neil, did you want to say something, or is that a thumbs up? Okay, great. Okay, so noted. Will we leave this topic now?
My hand's up, Brian.
Okay, sorry, Pat. Go ahead.
I guess I just want further direction. Are you comfortable with staff creating those questions and sending them out? Do one of you or some of you want to review those before they go out? I just want to make sure we're clear and that it's Elora Center for the Arts Riverfest, Elora Center for the Arts, KIP. Those are the three that you want us to send these questions to. Oh, you want Bungalow and Bungalow 55?
I think.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So we'll hear from all four. And written submission, are you okay with staff just putting similar questions to what they're going to have to respond to together? Or would some of you, it would be great if a couple of you would review those in advance of them going out.
Kurt and Jennifer, would you like to
review? I'll review them.
Yep.
Kurt's agreed to review. Jennifer, would you do it too? And
Neil.
Okay, that's three. That sounds good. I think. Sounds
Pat,
good to me.
I think it came up, but I think for having people express rationale for the change is important. It might carry a little more weight if circumstances that they did not see or circumstances beyond their control created the need to shift. And perhaps that will help to be a consideration in terms of whether they could go forward or not. In terms of, are we telling them then, oh, well, yeah, you can't do it, so we all want the money back? Like, I guess that is that what we're saying to them? Is their only other option? Either do it. Well, we can't do it. These are the reasons why we can't. We didn't see this. Okay, well then give it back. And perhaps their rationale might provide some more reason for being able to still move forward with it.
Are you asking a question? Or
I was just saying, throw in rationale as one of the questions, so people can clearly explain why they had to change.
That sounds fine. Yep.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, Pat, do you have enough information now, Pat?
Yes, that's good direction. Thank you.
Great. Okay, shall we move on to 5.2, which is the information about the trail link? Is that Matt that's going to speak to that? Or Dorothy, probably.
No, I'm going to speak to that first. And I'd have to get there on my agenda. Hold on. I'm deep in some other things. Here we go. Okay. So what I'm going to ask is if Matt, so there's Matt Tucker and there's Mathieu Alain, and Mathieu Alain is here tonight. He's going to be talking about urban forestry, but fortunately he's already here. He's one of the leads putting this grant application together, so he can answer any questions. But basically, I just wanted to share that, I don't know if everyone can see the diagram, or if you want Devlin to share the diagram of where this trail link is happening. Do you want it shared on the screen? There we go. So I just wanted to explain that the township is applying for a Canada Healthy Communities Fund grant, and there's there's 3 streams, and it's about COVID recovery. And one of the streams that the township is looking at is providing safe outdoor spaces for the community. And so what we're asking from CSAC is just a letter to support this application, to show that there's been community involvement and engagement. And so if you look at the diagram, what we have I guess it would be to the right of the three orange lines is the trail leading to the Cataract Way Trail, and that's right where the Elora School is. And then to the other direction, it's the rest of Church Street, and you can turn left there and get right down to Bissell Park, and there are sidewalks there. But the orange section has no sidewalks. It's a narrower road. And so we're proposing to install a 3-meter wide multi-purpose path where you see the orange lines there. And so we're going to submit this application for the full funding. It's part of a trail link connection, because this will put a safe way for everyone to link together the two trails, as well as to get to downtown. And it'll also provide a safer way for children to get to school. It's 3 meters wide to allow for social distancing during COVID, or while that's still an important thing. And it just encourages the use of our outdoor spaces more. So I wanted to present this since I had an opportunity. The application is due next week. So we would like to ask the committee to provide a letter of support for the project, for the grant application. And I would hope that maybe Brian could write that on behalf as the chair of the CSAC committee. So that's the ask, and I just wanted to present it, and we're here to answer any questions about this application. There's $31 million across Canada to apply for this fund.
Okay, well, I'm happy to write it, or I probably would need some words. I mean sort of technical words, or words that apply to exactly what we're applying for, but that can be done.
I can read that out for you, Brian, if you'd like.
Okay.
That CSAC endorsed the Trail Link project through the Canada Healthy Communities Program. You need anything
Simple as
else,
that.
Pat?
Just for a motion for tonight to agree to write the letter. But if you're needing more technical information to write the letter, of course we can provide that to you.
Absolutely. Well, perhaps Devlin and I can communicate afterwards. I mean, it's just that's a motion though. So do we have someone to move it? Jennifer, and a seconder.
Grace has her hand up.
Okay, thanks, Grace. Okay, all in favor of supporting them? Okay.
Just a comment on that. It's a great project, because as somebody who's walked that trail and walked from the council office and had to go up Colburn Street and then cut down, it would have been a lot easier to go up. It makes sense coming off that trail to come down Church Street into downtown. And it gets a lot of people confused there. And without having a sidewalk or a multi-purpose path, people are walking down the center of the road with their dogs and stuff. So it's a real good project. And if we can get grant money for it, it's a good thing to do.
Yeah, I walk there once a week, so I'm very familiar with it.
I think it'd be very beneficial for the school as well, with the amount of kids that are walking on that way to go see you, Kurt. So I'm sure that would be appreciated.
Good
Yeah,
point.
so I have a letter in the works as well, with my other hat on, that'll be going to Pat from the school. That'll go towards that. And Pat, just a question, whether you were looking for more letters of support, but the community members who are advocating for the bike trails connecting Fergus and Elora, have you tapped them on the shoulder at all, or are you looking for more letters of support?
If you're referencing the Green Lanes program, yes. So yes, we are, another staff person is reaching out to them to ask for a letter of support, yes.
Okay.
Great. And would the Trailway have any interest in supporting that as well?
I actually reached out to that. Is there a Trailway committee that we should be reaching out to? Brian,
Well,
who?
Well, I would just go through Raymond Susi.
Okay.
Yeah,
oh, see, he has a bit of a conflict, because some of this grant is going through it's complicated, but the Communities Foundations has a bit of input onto the applications. So the granting process. So he would not be, but someone else from the group.
Rick Goodfellow.
Okay.
If you need his email or something, I can give it to you in the fullness of time.
Okay.
And Pat, when do you want Brian and I to finish our homework? By Friday?
Yeah, that's the other thing. Can I get those by Friday? Sorry for the short notice, or over the weekend if you want, but we have to submit, we have to gather it all together and have it submitted, ready to insert on Monday. So we're on a short deadline here.
Well, it shouldn't be difficult, but I have some pro forma questions, so I'll probably, maybe I could talk to Devlin tomorrow morning or something.
Sounds good. Thanks, everybody.
Okay. Sorry, I'm off my agenda here. I'm going to have to get back into it. Sorry, just rather than waste time, my computer shut down here, so I'm going to have to find my way back into my agenda. So do you want to, somebody just want to say what's next on the agenda and we'll go ahead?
Urban forestry overview.
Oh, good. Well, this is great. Okay, I'm looking forward to hearing Monsieur Alain.
So just some background before I introduce Mathieu Alain. He is our landscape architect and urban forester, but he also handles all of our, works with us on all of our outdoor capital parks projects. He's a man of many, many talents and trades. But this committee a few meetings ago, I think it was actually maybe before COVID, had requested to hear what our our urban forestry program was about. So I'm bringing him here now to share that information. So I introduce to you Mathieu Alain.
Thanks, Pat. Just have a question. Am I going to be presenting by sharing the screen? Because I've got a PowerPoint presentation, or is definitely.
You should be able to share your screen.
Okay, okay. I'll give that a shot.
If it's easier, Devlin does have your slides. I just know that if you're the sharer, right, Dorothy, you could also leave the meeting and disconnect everybody. That happened at today's Zoom meeting. So just make sure that doesn't happen, Devlin.
Does that work? I have something up on my screen.
Yes, we're good to go. Thanks, Mathieu.
Great. Okay. Technology is not always my friend, so I'm glad that worked out. So many of these slides are from the council orientation we put together for community services. I kept this first one because even though it's a little bit blurry, I like it. And also, this is just a quick breakdown. I'm sure you're well aware, but the different departments in community services, urban forestry is of course one of them. And a nice picture of community planting event on the Cottontail Road Trail. I think the child on top of the wood chips is Bruce's son, and he was very, very helpful that day. Bruce in our staff member in aquatics. So this is the overview of the department. There's only one staff in urban forestry, that's me. This description's from it's straight out of my job description. I'm a landscape architect and urban forestry project manager. The role is responsible for managing design, construction, development, and redevelopment in the urban forest, trails, parks, and related facilities, open spaces. I just have to close this. As well as open space related portions of new commercial residential developments. So I have a master's degree in landscape architecture. I'm licensed with the Ontario Association of Landscape Architects. I'm also certified with the International Society of Arboriculture and the Ontario chapter. And that's sort of my background. I don't work in a vacuum. I have help running forestry programs from other staff. Marissa McKay, our horticulturalist, is involved with the Township Commemorative Tree Program and maintaining the commemorative trees in our parks. Tim and Brad in Public Works, they're the foremans for Laura and Fergus. are responsible for managing emergency tree work with their own staff and assisting with selecting street tree planting locations. I also have assistance from Public Works service persons. So they're assigned to forestry operations on an as-needed basis. And they do, apart from hazard trees that fall on the road, they are involved with clearance pruning and removal of hazard trees that are less than 30 centimeters DBH, and also don't have any conflicts with existing infrastructure, hydro buildings, lights, that kind of thing. Quite a bit of the work is outsourced to contractors. So this is for large caliper urban street tree plantings. We plant, for street trees, we plant 50 millimeter caliper, which the size of the root ball is too much for us to move without equipment. The contractors we hire have cranes on the back of trucks, and they can actually move each one in and out. Hazard pruning, stump grinding, removal of hazard trees greater than 30 centimeters DBH, those are all contracted out. So I have a little bit more information. Pat touched on it related to the landscape architecture side of my responsibilities. So in that role, I coordinate updates to the parks bylaw, urban design guidelines, and development manual. Plan and design parks, green spaces, trails, or redevelopment of the same, as well as collaborating with staff on township-wide public realms initiatives. Generate creative, detailed concept plans, construction drawing, detailed specifications, and tender documents. This varies from project to project. So for example, for Far Park, I've been producing all the drawings from concept right through to the tender documents. But a park like Grandwood Gate, for example, that was done through the developer. The developer hired a landscape architect. And so apart from reviewing and improving documents, a lot of the work was done by the consultant involved. So it very much varies from project to project. Managed budgets, capital expenditures, and scheduling for the delivery of parks and trail construction projects. Contract administration of park and trail construction projects. Again, that varies whether there's a consultant involved. Often there is, sometimes there aren't. And whether we do a full tender or a request for proposal. Consults with staff and consultants on future maintenance of new construction. Coordinates with purchasing on requests for proposals, requests for quotations, and tender documents. Evaluates tender bids and makes recommendations for contract awards. Reviews landscape plans for site plan application and subdivision applications. This is working closely with the planning department when applications come in. I don't always review all the documents, but I do review many of the site plans. Like landscape plans. Also assisting horticulture and public works with landscape design drawings. So I just finished a design for the newest section of Bellside Cemetery. And also in the fall, we did a design for the Fergus Curling Club. I know this is a lot of information, but I'm just going off of sort of job descriptions that we have on file. Urban forestry responsibilities, develops and delivers public forest policy, trees on public property bylaw, and boulevard garden policy. So the public forest policy I wrote in 2017 when I started. It was approved by council in January 2018. So it's sort of the handbook of what I am involved with and work on related to forestry programs. The trees on public property bylaw, something we're working on right now. So we've got a report, we're working on a report for council at the end of the month. The boulevard garden policy was developed by infrastructure. Since I've been working here, they now have me administer that policy. It deals deals a lot with sight lines and also what types of plants can be grown on township property on the boulevard within the road allowance. So there's a lot of overlap with what I do with trees. So just in the interest of efficiency, I manage that one. Manages ash tree removal, hazard tree removal, street tree planting, community planting events, and community maintenance pruning. That's the meat and potatoes of the forestry program. Reviews, monitors, and revises tree maintenance and planting programs. Updates and manages the township digital GIS tree inventory. I've got an example of that coming up. Completes tree inspections, inventories, and arborist reports for the township for township-owned trees. My biggest client, you could say, is infrastructure when they're doing road reconstruction work. There's often street trees involved, so I've been assisting them with that, which has been a good collaboration. Insurance compliance with arboriculture best practices and IPM principles. Supervises the urban forestry co-op student, assigns work related to urban forestry, service requests, tree and park maintenance, horticulture, arboriculture. So unfortunately, we didn't have a co-op student last summer due to COVID, which was really unfortunate for me. But we are currently looking at resumes for a co-op student for this coming summer. Coordinates annual arboriculture training to infrastructure services, community services, and CW Hydro. So this again didn't happen last summer due to COVID, but I think we've had 3 training programs so far. And really this is related to pruning because there's a lot more science behind pruning than just chopping down trees. Reviews arbor supports and tree protection and enhancement plans for site plan applications and subdivision applications. So again, this is with the planning department, and it's sort of the second phase of reviewing landscape plans. Responds to all forestry public service requests, administers work orders for trees. So essentially all tree concerns come to me, whether they come through town hall or infrastructure, or some come directly to me. And it's usually we get about over 200 service requests a year. Last year was, I think, 220 to 230. And it's a big part of my job, just keeping on top of those. But yeah, it's going well, I guess. Just going to mention a few current projects. Forefar Park redevelopment, our RFQ. Oh, sorry, that should read playground RFP. So the proposal came back last week. So Matt, Pat, and I are reviewing the playground design proposal from some qualified contractors. Now, the next step after we've awarded that, I'll be working on releasing the park construction tender. Hopefully that will be out in the next month or so, and then we can look at construction this summer. Graham Park redevelopment, similar process. We're about to release the playground RFP. We've got a landscape architect involved with this one, so the park design, we've done some concept drawings, but the park design is going to follow shortly, and park construction tender after we've got that done. Spring street tree planting, May to June start. So typically I plant 100 street trees in the spring and 100 street trees in the fall. And last year we had, of course, a little less due to issues around COVID. This year, I've got about 75 planned for the spring, and I'm hoping to get the bulk of that, 125 in the fall. And in order to manage the budget, some changes to the budget this year, I'm trying to plant most of those trees using compensation funds from developers who have removed trees in their projects. So I think Of those 75 trees, 10 I'll be paying for from the urban forestry budget. The rest have been paid for by compensation. The trees on public property bylaw report, I mentioned that earlier. So that will be presented to council March 22nd. Some trends. A large proportion of our urban forest is over mature, dominated by large sugar maples and in decline due to age and conflict with infrastructure. Dozens are removed each year because of the hazard they pose to public safety. The public forest policy recommends that every tree removed is replaced by 2 trees. Due to a large volume of declining ash that require removal, we're working hard to meet a 1-to-1 ratio of our replacement trees. Even if we were able to meet a 2-to-1 tree replacement ratio, the loss of our mature trees has a significant negative impact on canopy cover within the township. Canopy cover being a more accurate measure of health of the public forest rather than total number of trees. This, of course, is because of just the sheer size of a mature canopy versus a freshly planted tree and the ecosystem services that they provide. Approximately 6,000 ash trees have been inventoried to date in the township, and this image here is of our ash tree inventory. It's GIS-based program that I have access to on my phone or on my desktop, and Greg, our GIS coordinator, has helped me put together. So we've got, these are just the ash trees. We also have several hundred or several thousand street trees inventoried as well. Only 2/3 of our rural roads have been inventoried. So we're estimating there could be another 1,000 ash trees out there. And virtually none of our woodlots, actually, I don't know if that's true. We've inventoried some, but not all of our woodlots. We don't have that many, but there could be a large number of trees we don't know about. Currently, we've removed about 2,000 ash trees. Using the EAB ash mortality curve, there will be an additional 1,200 to 1,500 ash trees to remove in 2021. And just to explain that sentence, the EAB, emerald ash borer, is the invasive beetle that is causing the decline and death of ash trees in our area. So in 2015, we had a report prepared by a consultant, and they provided this mortality curve to help us plan our forestry program and our ash tree work plan. In 2022, this number jumps to 1,900, from 1,900 to 2,100 additional ash trees to remove. So it's a little bit of a scary number. The good news is that we've done a reasonably good job of removing ash trees in our urban areas. So, you know, that's something that reduces risk. If they're heavily populated and they're heavily used, people are on the streets. Some more good news is that with not very much snow this winter, at least at the beginning of the winter, we had infrastructure with their, you know, a big team of infrastructure staff that were able to tackle quite a few ash trees. They removed over 300 in Elora, around Elora. And I'm not sure what they're at in Fergus, but hopefully it's going to end up being a similar number. Just one final trend. Staff have had great support with community planting projects. I should mention that the reason I find that these are very important is, again, we're going to struggle for many years dealing with loss of our mature sugar maples, but certainly our ash trees. So if we want to rebuild the urban forest, this is an excellent way to do it. In 2019, there were 3 community plant events that planted approximately 430 trees and shrubs. We anticipate being able to continue facilitating these planting events yearly or seasonally, COVID dependent. Last year, there were no events. I think staff we planted probably around 50 native trees and shrubs in a couple of different projects just to get those ones done. But this coming year, COVID dependent, we'll be back at it again. This also doesn't include our warden's plants. In 2019, there's 800 trees planted by the county, which is just a beautiful, beautiful program. Our list of partners include Rotary Club, Neighborhoods, Communities, Green Legacy, Union Gas, RBC, Dillon Consulting, and the GRCA. Okay, that's all I had. I'll open it up for any questions.
Anyone have any questions? Go ahead, Neil.
Matt, can you talk about what you're doing with the ash trees? I mean, if you're cutting down 1,200, 1,500 trees a year, what are we doing with the wood? Are you recycling that? Are you upcycling? What are you doing with it?
That is a very good question. When we sat down to write the public forest policy, we specifically put some thought into it, and what we wanted was for it to be, for that wood to serve a purpose. So we do make it available to local craftsmen or mills or anyone who wants to use it for locally for a product. We had a bit of interest at the beginning, but at this point, there's more ash than anyone can manage. And that interest has sort of gone away, which is unfortunate. The other issue is that we have exceeded our space for storing the bodywood of ash trees or of any tree, and that, you know, quite a while ago. So it's become a liability. So in most contracts, we have to pay the contractor to remove the bodywood, and the good contractors take it to a mill to get processed, and we see the savings from that happening. So I always keep track of what the contractors are planning to do. We also there is issues with liability when it comes to allowing residents. You know, it's different if it's a business because they've got insurance and they're used to handling material. But with residents, we have issues with liability, letting residents use wood for firewood. But if you know, if it's a big project, we're cutting down 100 trees, and someone reaches out to us to say that they would love some firewood, and we know they're local, we don't want any wood leaving our area and spreading the infestation. What I've done is just put them in contact with the contractor. So it's an arrangement between the contractor and the resident. It's not us. We're not involved. I'm just letting them speak to each other about it. And in some cases that helps, helps us manage our costs, because the contractors will, if not bodywood, then they'll be able to deliver mulch to people in the area. So that's where we're at right now.
You and I had actually talked a while back about some subdivisions. Some developers had wanted to put benches and stuff, wood benches in their parks in their subdivision. Have any of them reached out to you about, because I suggested to them that they reach out to you and purchase the ash, or you at least use the ash. If we're cutting it down and they're putting in wood benches in the park areas that they're developing for us, why not save the wood and do that? So I guess the question is, have they reached out to you at all? Have you heard from any of them?
Yeah, we did have interest for the Haylock subdivision for ash seeding, I guess, but also for using wood from the site for maybe some natural playgrounds. With that location, though, we were concerned about its proximity to termite zone. So we've steered them away from wood, and now they're using as much reclaimed stone as they can, because it's also a very rocky area, and they were able to collect quite a bit of native stone rubble from the road reconstruction and servicing they were doing. And they've so far built 2 dry stone walls, sort of feature walls at the north end of the site. So if you drive by on South River Road, you'll see one of them. It looks really, really good when you get up close to it. So that's something interesting that's happening there. We did put in 3 log benches at Tate Crescent Park, not far from the sportsplex, just to see if if we'd get any interest from the neighborhood for doing that in the rest of our parks. So far, I haven't heard much, but I recommend that if that's something you're interested in, go take a look at Tate Crescent Park and see what you think of that one.
So if you haven't heard anything, you haven't heard anything negative either, have you?
Haven't heard anything negative, haven't heard anything positive.
Okay, well, it's the negative that concerns me because people complain they don't say thank you. So I would continue doing that.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Speak up if you do, because I can't necessarily see all of you. In that case, as chairman, I'd like to thank you, Mathieu, for a great presentation. Almost all of us are affected by what you do. And I've got 3 lovely trees growing on my Boulevard property that after 2 of them came down, so 2 big ones came down. So choice of trees, which was quite good. So again, thank you.
I think our leader is frozen. Is it just him?
Yeah, I can see everyone else moving, so I'm thinking it's just him.
Okay.
Well, thanks very much for having me. It was my pleasure.
Sorry, I guess we went into a freeze there.
Just you, Brian.
Just me?
Just
was that me?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, so what did I miss? We're okay to move on then?
I think Matt was just going to say something and then we're done. Mathieu, were you going to say anything?
Oh, just thanks for having me, and it was my pleasure.
Good stuff. Okay. We're going to, item 6.2 is opening framework and vaccination clinic. And I'm not sure who's going to speak to that, but I'm looking forward to hearing about it.
I think it's going to be the guy who's been pulling his hair out for the past 2 weeks getting that vaccine clinic. That is Matt, doing an excellent job at it, Matt Tucker.
Yeah, it's nice to see it up and running. Nice to see people coming in and getting needles in arms, that's for sure. Yeah, no, we've been up and running now for a couple of weeks, and just, it's great to see people coming in. We just recently, you've probably seen the photos in the paper. It's working out quite well. We did make some modifications just so we're prepared for more people coming in. Right now, we're set up for a good 2,000 people that could come through in a day. So when I say 2,000, it would probably stretch from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. And we also have the ability to get more needles and arms throughout the day. So we haven't, depending on the vaccine availability, that's sort of how the days have been. Even to nail down a schedule, it has been tough. So just to give you an idea, when you guys come in for your shot, you walk into the sportsplex and you'll be greeted by security. They ask all those questions we get asked whenever we go into a store, and basically from there you'll go into this one side of the hall, and where you all register, sign up. There's before that, there's pre-registration online. So they want you to register online first. And then when you do, you basically come in, you register in the hall. And from there, you make your way to pad B. And basically you wait in line. Nurse will put their hand up and you proceed to that spot. You get your shot and you proceed further down into the arena where you sit for about 15 minutes. And then after that, you go to the checkout, get your paperwork, and you're out of there. So it's worked out quite well. We, like I said, we modified it a couple days ago, and we did a trial run today just with the hall setup. There wasn't as many people through today, but we wanted to make sure that all the kinks were out. There's different power requirements that are needed. And so it's worked out real well. Just to give you an idea, so we're closed. The clinic's is closed tomorrow and back open Friday, Saturday, and Monday, and they're expecting 750 people through a day. So it is working well. We've also had Dufferin, the County Dufferin, someone from Orangeville came to check out how we had it all set up. City of Guelph came also, and Linamar. Basically, they've came to see how we've got things, and just talking with public health, it sounds like there's going to be set up at in Orangeville and in the City of Guelph, and they're going to be using a very similar setup to what we've designed. So it's great. Does anybody have any questions on the clinic?
I have a couple. Kurt, you can go ahead. I've been talking a lot. You go first.
Just a thanks to Matt and the whole team, because it sounds like that's gone well, and it's another part of your job description of the never-ending changing carousel of your job description, Matt. So thanks for that. And just generally, I think as a community, between Wellington, Dufferin, Guelph Public Health, and who we are in Center Wellington, I think we're in good shape. I keep hearing positive things about how we're responding to everything, and now moving on to the vaccination. So good job.
Thank you.
Neil, did you want to add a comment?
Just jump in there. I was going to say the same thing. I was going to thank you, Matt. I get a lot of calls from people around the vaccination center. And one of the things that I've learned in the last week, at least, is that you guys are leading the way. Other communities are coming here and saying, hey, how does Center Wellington do it? Because we're not getting complaints out of Center Wellington. They're getting complaints out of Guelph and everywhere else. I had people calling me today asking me if they could come up here. And I said, it's not my job. You have to call the public health. But they waited 45 minutes outside in Guelph. Can you imagine being 90 years old waiting 45 minutes outside in the cold? And there is no, you're not outside here. You come when you have your appointment, you go inside, and the way it works is really great. So kudos to you and your staff, and you guys are doing a great job, and you're really making us look good. The only question I have for you, and I do get this from residents all the time calling me, if their parents have an appointment, are people allowed to escort them in, walk with them? Because if they're unstable on their feet without having an appointment, nobody's going to turn the primary caregiver back.
No, yeah. So yeah, I've seen a lot of that. So a lot of caregivers coming in. When we did have the registration set up in the streetscape, we had chairs lined up for people to sit while they're waiting in line to register. And there's also, they have a wheelchair, just one wheelchair right now, and they're looking at adding a few more. So
good.
It's great. And I can't thank staff enough. They've really worked hard on this.
Well, pass my thanks on to all of them, because you guys are just knocking it out of the park, and it's greatly appreciated.
Thanks, I will, for sure.
Thanks. Jennifer?
Yeah, just repeating what a great job you guys are doing. I think definitely it's a leader, even within Ontario, really, in the vaccination rollout. As we are kind of talking community services here, I'm just kind of curious, obviously vaccination is a priority. And I believe right now it is limited to like pad B, and pad A, there's the ice, and the ice will be going out soon, I think. Is pad A still kind of reserved for sports to hopefully to continue into the summer months, or could both pads be looking at being utilized for the vaccine?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jennifer. Like, I think right now, just talking with public health, they're really just wanting just to use that one pad. They fully understand the importance of the ice and the floor for our community. There may be a time where we might have to shut down pad A for a couple of weeks if there's if we get our hands on a large amount of vaccine. I think that'll be a push maybe for a couple of weeks. But just chatting with public health, they're going to try and keep us up to date as best as possible.
Good stuff. Anyone else? FYI, Nicola Mercer, the medical officer of health, was on CBC on the weekend, and she was particularly sought out because of the success of the Wellington, Dufferin, Guelph program. So you're a part of that, Matt. Way to go, man.
Great, thank you.
I think we can move on now. I'm going to
Yeah, Matt,
sorry.
were you going to talk about the opening framework, or did you want me to?
Oh, sorry,
that?
I thought that was all part
That's
of it.
okay, Matt. No, that just, so I think Jennifer had a good point. So where's everything gone? What are we doing to keep recreation in our community? We can maybe quickly update everybody on what's running, where it's moved to, and where we're going with all of that.
Yeah, I was going to mention that in my update, but I can mention it now. That's all good. So no, the team, programming team, they've been working hard to basically we moved a lot of our programs over to the Alain Community Center. So we've set up pickleball. We were able to fit a court in the hall there. And we've also moved over the MOSA classes, other fitness classes, as well as some senior programming as well, more so just on the fitness end of it. We're also hoping to utilize our ice on some programming as well. So we're looking at like a senior skate, a parent to tot, and a family skate as well. So we're looking at different programming through the day where we can utilize the ice. As far as ice availability, we're working closely with the minor sports groups. They're starting to finish up their program. So there is some open ice available. I know Amy has been working hard with the minor sports groups, but at the same breath, we've had a lot of people phoning and wanting to book that ice up for private rentals. So things we're booming. It's great. Just moving forward to once we start taking the ice out, we're going to be looking at some other programming on our floors as well. So during the day, before lacrosse, we'd look at just taping some pickleball lines out, say either on pad A or at the Alain Community Center, just where we can, where we're going to, where we have space, we're going to try and set up programming for the community. Have I missed anything there, Pat?
Well, there's a giant hole at the aquatic center that maybe people want to get into.
Sorry, that was in my other update. I've got that. I'm going to do all my update now. Yes, sorry. The pool, the grout work is done. And today it marked a good day. We actually started the water. So we started filling the pool up, and just the way it's going to work, it'll probably be about a week to fill. We have to slowly fill the water back up just so it doesn't shock the grout. And just with the colder temperature of the water going in. So it'll take about a week. It'll probably be about just a little less than a week just to get the chemical in and balance the pool properly. And before we open, we have to have the health unit come in and give it the green light. So there's a bit of a process we have to follow. Just chatting with Bruce as well. Our staff have been off for a while, so there's some staff that need to be recertified. So that recertification takes about 4 to 5 days, and then there'll be some staff training involved. So I think we're hoping to open the doors to the public in about 3 weeks' time. So that's we've given ourselves a bit of a buffer. We've got, so with the pool being down for so long and dry, we're just worried about getting the pumps up and running if there's seals that need to be replaced. So we don't want to be too aggressive on the opening date, just in case something does happen.
But I think one win is that the Aquatic Center can operate while the vaccine clinic is going on. So we're very excited about that. So we're trying to keep things as normal as possible. Thank you, Matt. That was great. You remembered about the big hole.
I have it written down. Yeah.
Thanks to both of you. Good news. Moving along to 6.3, the Healthy Growth Advisory Committee. My update is very similar to last month. We're still defining the problem, getting everyone's sort of input on how to go ahead, but basically we're looking at a serious problem in our community of lack of attainable housing, particularly rentals, and we're a large body of people on that committee that are hopefully moving ahead to define the problem a little better, to have some goals and actually create a process to get something moving so that we can increase the amount of rental accommodations available in our community. That's a pretty short summary of a long meeting, but I'm happy to entertain any questions. It's actually quite exciting stuff, and it could be a pretty good outcome if we get it right. So anyway, I don't see any questions, so I'll move along then. Thank you. Council update, Neil.
Well, I've got nothing to say. Nothing happened at council. It was a quiet week.
Says our new deputy mayor.
So you probably read in the paper and heard there was a bit of controversy surrounding one of the councillors and the position he took. And I respect his right to take that position. I just didn't think that it was his job to be in charge of the emergency measures plans if the mayor was down, when he had the opposing view of how we should be dealing with this. And so I put forward a motion, and it was accepted by council, and he was removed as deputy mayor, and that left a vacancy. And as punishment for bringing the motion forward, somebody put my name forward. And so I'm the new deputy mayor, and I joke about it, but it's actually an honor and a privilege. So I'll do the best I can. So that's one of the things that came out of council. The other one was we sent quite a report to them from our last meeting about the community grants and what to do with it. And in the end, they listened to what this committee said. And Kurt, you said, do they actually listen to us? And I said when I came on this committee at the start, I'll take my advice from you guys, and my vote will always match your vote. And I'll fight for that when I go to council. And that's what happened this time. So they accepted your recommendations, and they put the extra money aside, and we'll have a debate about that. What to do with that when it comes to a presentation, I think, from one of the other councillors on what neighborhood committees should look like and what we can do with the remainder of that money. And that's based on the recommendations that came out of here. And of course, we sent one back to you guys. And so here we've talked about it tonight. And that's the back and forth that's going to happen. But the one thing I want to make sure that you guys are clear on is that I do listen to you guys. And I can't speak for the other councillors, because everybody's got, as much as I listen to what gets said here, because to me, you're the citizens' representation and you're the cross section of the community. And so you get, we don't all live in the same neighborhood. So you give me the advice that I need from other areas of the community, but they're listening to people in their ear. And I can tell you, as a councillor, every one of them, that phone rings on a regular basis, and there's always somebody with something to say. But as far as being on a committee, council, my opinion on that is you always vote with a committee that you sit on. And so know that whatever you bring to council from this committee, I'll fight tooth and nail to represent and to make sure the other councillors hear what you're trying to say to them, because you've had a bit more wholesome discussion than a lot of other people have. So know that. And that's, you know, the vaccination center, I can't be happier, Matt, and the whole community. We're other, you know, I was on 570 News the other day, and they said it about 6 times. You know, Kitchener-Waterloo and Guelph should be more like Center Wellington. You guys are handling this thing. And I'm like, okay, you know, just keep it coming. I can feel the love. But it's true. Our staff are doing a great job, and we're handling this well. Is it the perfect solution? Nobody's got a perfect solution to this. This is uncharted waters, and we're all juggling balls. And I think our community is doing a really good job of it. So thanks again, Matt and Pat and Dorothy. You guys all do a wonderful job. So greatly appreciated. That's all I got for you, Brian.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. We will move along to staff updates and start with Pat.
Actually, that's Matt, Parks and Facilities update. That's okay. Matt, did you have anything else to share about other facilities or anything in your department? You should not be, you should turn your mute off.
Oh, yeah, that might help. Sorry. Just want to chat about one thing additional, and that's the outdoor ice rinks. You know, we had a total of 11 outdoor ice rinks throughout Center Wellington. There was four ice rinks that township staff started. And as we were building them, we had 2 neighborhood groups jump on board and want to take that over. So it's just amazing. We got amazing people here in Center Wellington. They want to make our community a lot better place. And I just wanted to sort of have a shout out to our community volunteers doing the ice rinks, and also in Bellwood, the Bellwood Lions for doing it out there. So that was, that's all I have to report today.
Great, thanks. You've done a lot of reporting today. Cultural and special events update. Dare I guess that it's Dorothy?
You guessed right. I'll be quick. I'm looking at the time, wondering why I'm yawning. Anyway, I just wanted to let you know that I'm working closely with the BIAs. We've developed a policy for our sidewalk patios and cafes and displays, actually. So I'm taking a report, not me personally, somebody else is taking a report to council in March for approval. And we're hoping for a much easier transition with all our outdoor patios and cafes this summer than we did last year. We kind of flew by the seat of our pants, and we want to support our businesses and give them all the flexibility we can. So we've developed a very good, solid policy to make that happen again this year. And I'm working again with the Allura BIA for the road closures this summer. That's going to continue May through the end of October again this year, every weekend. And I'm working with Kim and the Fergus BIA with the Provost Lane project and keeping it closed on weekends as well. So we've got a lot going on trying to support all our businesses in town. And I just want to update real quick where our senior center is still closed, but we are offering a full complement of virtual programming for our seniors. And just as an example, for the month of October, oh my God, I need to go to bed. For the month of February, we've had 1,943 people participate in our Zoom programming. That is remarkable. And we talk about Center Wellington being on the map with the clinic. Center Wellington is also on the map for our virtual programming. We're getting calls from other municipalities going, what are you doing? Because we're not being that successful. So Center Wellington is really getting on the map for the things we are doing. So that's pretty exciting. And yeah, and we're in the talking now about reopening our tourism office very soon. We're still not promoting tourism. I want you to be perfectly clear on that. But we're a bit anxious to get some staff back in and get things rolling again. So we're hoping to have that by April 1st, whether we're in red or orange or green, whatever. I know I'm ready to get it open again. So that's all I have to update on. Thank you.
Thanks as always, Dorothy. That was great. Good news. Departmental and capital projects update. Pat.
Hi there. Yeah, so I'm actually have really not much else to report. Dorothy and Matt covered a lot of what's going on in the department. As you can imagine, community services is extremely busy. We have all of the challenges of the COVID reopening, as well as the vaccination clinic. And although it's snowing and yucky outside, we are already planning for our summer. So what parks, how are parks opening? We're going to be reaching out to our minor sports groups that use the outdoor fields and get their plans in place. So, we're already thinking about the summer and trails, and excited about this potential community link project that we have going on. But that's, as you heard from also Matt, Alain, we have a terrific team here in Center Wellington that are constantly improving this community, and always thank you to this committee, because you've been dealt a big hand at the last council meeting to deal with. And I thought you're doing a great job, and I'm pretty sure we'll come up with the right answer and report that back to council. But otherwise, unless there's a question about the department, I have nothing else to report.
And are there any questions? Great. Well, no hands. Thank you. We've endured a long meeting. We've seen some bright lights in the future and some current bright lights, and a big meeting next time. And that is April the 7th. And we'll look forward to seeing everybody then. And I guess that brings our meeting to an end.
Good night, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Cheers, everyone.
See you next month.
Thanks for everything.
Good night, everybody.
Now,